Alrighty. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Washington Post's still untitled video game news show. I mean, I say still untitled. This is the first time that we've done this in this format actually live. So, it'll get a title eventually and it'll be real neat. Our guest today is the esteemed Devin Nash, who I brought on entirely. And this is the real reason, entirely because he looks kind of like DrLupo. Look at it.
That's really my intro, and all my qualifications summed up. It's
Yep.
just
Yeah.
all right.
We couldn't get Dr.
We'll
Lupo
take it.
again. So I already interviewed him earlier, like late last week. So I was like, well, who's a serviceable lookalike? And and I was just like, oh, it's Devin. There we go.
I'll
That's
remember this, Nathan. When I get my exclusive deal with YouTube for millions of dollars, and you send me that Discord message, I don't know.
But no, the real reason I decided to bring Devin on is that he is very well informed in terms of everything having to do with live streaming, Twitch, creator economy, YouTube, all that stuff. He knows it super well. So I figured if there was anyone who could talk through the ramifications of people like DrLupo and TimtheTatman going to YouTube this week, it would be him.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I want to say that I woke up recently, and I was and I was very surprised to learn that this is an actual news show because I thought it was just Nathan in his basement inviting some friends to do a show. So now I'm lucky that I just did 2 YouTube videos about this, right? So I actually have
Mhm.
like really comprehensive notes. And just from the research that was required for those about this subject, so hopefully I can kind of keep pace. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm surprised by the caliber of the show for sure. Yeah.
Well, we still have plenty of time to disappoint you. So
Okay.
don't worry. I'm sure that I'll make some horrible mistake or, you know, set something behind me on fire. That would actually be good content, though. I'll try to set my apartment on fire while we're talking about YouTube.
If you set fire to your apartment on the Washington Post stream, does the Washington Post make an article about it on the Washington Post?
Oh my God. This is a really good question. Again, this is just more reason for me to do it. I want to find out.
Yeah. Washington Post reporter sets own apartment on fire. Exclusive from the Washington Post.
That would rule. Oh, by the way, I'm being a horrible host. We also have Shannon here. Shannon is another reporter at the Washington Post. We are going to do a segment on one of her pieces later, but the more the merrier, right? Say hello, Shannon.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I mean, better late than never, right? And now that you've mentioned it, I do think that Devin looks a little like DrLupo, but before you mentioned it, I hadn't seen that resemblance.
Yeah.
20 years older and a little fatter, but yes.
Except for that, actually, DrLupo is an ageless being. He's like 34.
Is he really?
Yeah, he just doesn't look it at all.
That's actually crazy. Yeah, I was
Yeah, I don't know what he does
now, right?
Right, like especially now that he has a kid, he should be aging like 10 years every year.
Yeah.
And yet somehow. So I don't think that's fair. Anyway, let's get to the actual meat of the discussion, which is that he earlier this week left Twitch, which is the platform that arguably is responsible for him being popular in the first place, for YouTube, which is something that I think a lot of people didn't see coming. And then right after that, we got TimtheTatman doing the same thing. And so now there's suddenly talk of like an exodus to YouTube of a bunch of major streamers leaving for a different platform, not unlike they did a couple years ago when Ninja and Shroud went to Mixer and some other streamers went to YouTube and other people went to Facebook and all of that. So, I mean, what do you make of this? Is this like a big inflection point, a big moment where there's going to be a lot of change, or is this kind of a couple isolated business moves that feel bigger than maybe they actually are?
That's a great way to lead it. It's with, I guess the most recent rumor we have is like Nick Merck saying, I've got this like big deal. I think somebody posted it in my Discord that what the quote was. And it sounded like a lot like this. It's funny that we're talking about like DrLupo having a kid and everything, right? Because it's directly relevant to this. Like YouTube's contracts are 100 hours versus like Twitch's that start at 200, right?
Mhm.
So that right there gives you a reason why people might be considering something like this. And like I'm thinking a lot about the OG content creators, like your Summit 1Gs, your Lyrics, and how they're looking at this. Um, it's how that affects small streamers. I think that's a really complex question, because there's a sort of romantic feeling around Twitch for people that people think that because Twitch is first to market and like the live streaming place to be, there's this idea that more popularity on the platform means more popularity for the broadcaster. And I think Twitch's greatest asset is that they've convinced people that live streaming success stories are more important on Twitch. Meaning that
Mhm.
like if you have a YouTube channel and you're killing it, like Dr. Disrespect sitting over there with 50,000 viewers, right? Like he's just objectively killing it. But for some reason, it like the impact of that feels less than somebody with the equivalent viewers on Twitch. That's like something they've managed to do, I think, by accident. That makes me unsure that this trend in the next like 1 to 2 years, short term, will be everybody going to YouTube. But like YouTube Live, I'm 100% convinced will be the place to stream in like 4 to 5 years, like no question.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, do you think that just because like obviously YouTube is relative to Twitch just a bigger platform? Like on the live streaming side of things, Twitch still commands like what, a little bit more than
65%.
60%? Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of overall size, like it's night and day. YouTube is massively bigger than Twitch on an enormous, like an orders of magnitude scale.
Well, also people are saying my mic's low. A lot of people.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if we could get a little bit more
Up that gain. I
volume
have this
on,
problem a lot. Yeah. Sorry, I have that problem a lot. I don't know why.
yeah, just
I'll
like eat
figure
your
it out.
mic, just like put it in your mouth and talk into it.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like th- Twitch. So when we're comparing stats across like these platforms, right? Like we're comparing YouTube gaming live, which is such a tiny like mode. It's not even all live streams on YouTube, right? It's just gaming live streams versus the massive amount of like travel and lifestyle stuff. Another really big one that people don't consider that I actually didn't even talk about in the video is premieres, right? Like a premiere is technically a live thing. And
Mhm.
people can wait for it and show up live like they can, but those are not counted at all in those stats. So if you start throwing like premieres in there and you start throwing in all of the other stuff, like YouTube live streaming is probably already vastly greater than Twitch is, like you said, just because it's a matter of scale.
Mhm.
And we're talking about 2 billion potential people, and yeah, and I hope we get into that today because it just once you start thinking about that number, you start realizing why like a lot of the complaints that uh, people have historically about streaming services like YouTube Live just don't add up because they're not going for the same things that Twitch is.
Mhm. Yeah. So wait, how do you mean they're not? Because it seems to me that like right now, what YouTube is sort of doing broadly and strategically is they are picking up a couple bigger streamers, or they're picking up
Hmm.
bigger streamers here and there. And what Twitch has that I think doesn't get as much conversation is a very deep roster of streamers, like streamers of all different sizes and tiers and things like that.
Hmm.
And it seems like the people who are making waves on YouTube are the bigger names that YouTube happens to poach by way of having deep pockets, whereas it doesn't pull the whole community over. It doesn't pull the people over who are like making the memes and creating the culture that is like such a bedrock of Twitch, to the point where, I mean, even if you look in like a YouTube chat, even like the chat that is next to this stream, a lot of like the memes and stuff are based on things that happen on Twitch, or like people will reference Twitch emotes even if they can't actually use those emotes. And
Very
that just
true.
all seems like a major part of the pull of Twitch that no amount of money that YouTube has, unless they just wholesale bring over like every streamer they can, could replicate.
Can I give you like my Da Vinci Code, like super conspiracy? I figured it out tinfoil hat
Oh
thing.
yeah, yes,
Okay.
I'm super on board for this.
I don't think that YouTube even considers at an executive level competing with Twitch. I
Mhm,
think they're after something totally different. And I want to read you a quote from
mhm,
the head of YouTube Live Gaming. Okay, so this is on Twitter. This is first of all, this is like some like 100 viewer person is just saying YouTube has some tech advantages as well. 4K streaming, higher bitrate, more discoverability. VODs after streams can be edited down with built-in tools. But for live discoverability in general, No one has really cracked that yet, so I wouldn't knock on YouTube individually. So then Ryan Watts of Fwiz, he responds, yes, I'm not sold that the best way to do this is game page stack ranked CCU streamer by highest viewed. So he's saying directory, right?
Right.
This creates bad viewer behavior that turns platforms into kingmakers of the biggest streamers, which then drives disproportionate amounts of watch time to the head. So what Ryan is saying there is like one of the big complaints you hear all the time about YouTube is why don't they improve their UI? Like, why don't they make it more accessible for people to find streams? And I would argue that, like, of course they have considered that. YouTube is not trying to create a platform that competes across the board on with Twitch on culture or by like grabbing these broadcasters. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make live streaming a secondary component of brand building for creators on their platform, and then make it the place to be for events. They've seen through like Laserbeam and like million plus viewers that like the most successful and like the Ariana Grande like Fortnite event, that like the most successful things that happen on live streaming are direct events. We see that on Twitch too with like Jerma's show, right? The sponsored by Coinbase, or like any of the podcast things, like universally the things that drive the most viewers to platforms are these event-based shows. YouTube isn't trying to create an ecosystem or a culture of broadcasters. Their ultimate goal, and here comes like the freaking national treasure, like Ocean's 11 stuff. like their ultimate goal is to make algorithmic learning possible to solve the discovery problem. They want to solve the problem that Twitch never solved.
Interesting.
Which was how do you find broadcasters? Well, right now on Twitch, you go through a directory of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Fortnite streams, and like what, you randomly click on one that's like 40 viewers.
Right.
Like, that's never going to happen. Like, YouTube wants to solve the problem that of finding live streamers in the exact same way that they solved the VOD problem. Where nowadays you can go on YouTube, on your homepage on YouTube, and I'll watch 5 videos that I want to watch because their ML is so good that they have convinced the system understands me through listening to my phone probably, and a Google guy with a microphone outside my office door probably, or some combination.
Now we're getting
of that.
real national treasure.
No, yeah, that's not true, right? like obviously, but like I forgot I'm on the Washington Post for a second. Sorry, but like
no, you can say whatever you want to say. It's fine.
Obviously, what I'm saying is the amount of data they're aggregating through machine learning and being able to process in real time informs customer behavior to such a degree that when you are on YouTube, you get exactly what you want. That is what they're going for on the live streaming thing. You'll never need to find someone through a directory, because you will find those people based on your viewing habits and your and what you like. And I think the end result of that, like 4 to 5 year time frame, is a much more discoverable platform.
Right. But yeah, and I mean, you already see Twitch kind of trying to do that, albeit not with machine learning. It seems like their algorithm for like recommendations is really rudimentary, and in most ways, like not that useful. Case in point, I don't use it. But yeah, no, like at the same time, obviously what YouTube has done with discovery on its platform is ridiculous, and like has defined the way that the entire thing functions. At the same time, though, the idea of that being mapped onto streaming is interesting to me because the form factor for streaming is so different. Because a lot of streams, like, you pop into that stream and you're there for, maybe an hour, maybe more. It depends on how you watch, right? But like if you're really into one streamer, maybe you watch them for like 3 hours every day or something. And so like the amount of movement between individual streamers to me strikes me as less than there would be between individual videos, which are generally shorter and like maybe more made to be like stopped and started and all of these different things.
I think that I agree, and I think that YouTube is, so I think historically, and I take blame for this too, we've thought of YouTube as being ignorant of these issues. So like, but I actually think they're conscious of it, and they're just trying to play a different game. And that game, the macro of that game, like the big conversation, is I don't think that YouTube sees live streaming in the same way that Twitch does, where Twitch sees live streaming as a primary career opportunity. But I think for the vast majority of people, by primary career, I define that as you're on stream 50 hours a week, you're slamming it, you're going live 8 hours a day. I think YouTube sees it as a secondary supplement to a total brand image. Does that make sense? And so they're and everything that they're doing points to that. So, like for example, let's look at the length of contracts and the requirements, right? Valkyrie encouraged JD finished their their contractual obligations very early in the year. They both said that, and so as a result, they are streaming less on YouTube. So, does YouTube care about that? Not really, because they're still making videos, they're still adding to the platform in different ways, and they see live streaming as a way to supplement your interaction with your audience. It's a way to directly engage with them that you wouldn't have before. But I think this idea of primary streaming every single day for 8 to 10 hours at like exhausting Hassan Abi levels or like or Amaranth levels is just not sustainable for any professional.
Right. Well, this was a major part of the discussion around both DrLupo and TimtheTatman leaving, right? So I mean, in the piece that I wrote, specific quote that DrLupo gave was he talked about how he wanted to spend more time with his family. He was like, family time is crazy important, as is reducing the amount of pressure because mental health is crazy important. And like other things he told me included that for a long time he didn't pay attention to the mental health aspect of it, and as a result, sort of, it caught up with him, and he had to deal with that kind of on his own terms and find a way to mitigate the impacts of working so hard for so long and not being able to spend a lot of time with his family and all of these other things. And then similarly, TimtheTatman told Business Insider basically the same thing.
Yeah.
He was like, the reality is now that I've got my wife and son, it's hard for me to stream as much as I did beforehand. And so in both cases, they are being pretty upfront about their motivations. They're like, I can't keep this pace anymore. And a platform offered me a means by which to still stream, but to not have it rule my entire life in the same way it used to. And, reading between the lines, they gave me a lot of money to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think money is like it's the easiest thing we throw at this, but like there's actually so much more of a conversation here, right? I love that you've got the DrLupo quotes. I quoted your interview with him, and now I'm also quoting. So he also said, right, like on Twitch, I'm a pretty big fish in the lake. When I move to YouTube, I'm a little fish in an ocean. There's so much room to grow, and there's so much opportunity to do incredible things with all sorts of content creators on YouTube. If this were any other platform, I might be concerned, but YouTube is like it. I think people underestimate the size of the platform, how much you can do with it, right? So they're also like it's the reason why I highlight that quote is it's meaningfully different from what you and I were talking about way back in the day with Mixer, where Shroud and Ninja made a basically purely financially motivated move. And when they went to Mixer, their streams didn't realistically survive in the same way that they did on Twitch. Like I think they were at like a 10th of the viewership for the duration of the time they were there. Versus on YouTube, when Courage and Valkyrie moved, they maintained success. They kept their numbers and increased their numbers and built their brand. And that's like really different. So I think that creators are looking at the payout. It would be ignorant for us to say that they're not, right? But they're also seeing this and they're saying, whoa, like there's opportunity for me to grow here and actually expand my brand to a larger addressable audience than the ceiling on Twitch allows me to. And that's a concept I call a saturation point. That like after 1 to 3 years is the top 1% on Twitch, you reach a point where you can't really grow realistically, like seeing the like meteoric growth of like Ludwig in the like last few years. It will slow down if he doesn't supplement that with like YouTube or Instagram or other like third-party funnels, right? He has to move. You have to start thinking about those things, and then eventually, I think you just become too big for the aquarium, and your choice is to either stay there at that concurrent viewership, or to vastly diversify into other platforms or move.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, like, I think, to use the example of Ludwig specifically, he's already somebody who's like very savvy about that, right? Like he makes a lot of content via streaming that he then adapts for YouTube, and like in ways where you could tell the original idea behind doing a thing in the first place was for it to go on YouTube eventually.
He's the smartest content creator on the platform. The smartest marketer on the platform. I say that because I'm stopped streaming. But he's incredibly put together, and he understands YouTube was his primary strategy going in. Like streaming is a supplement to his YouTube. Like, and he's said that a lot of times.
Right. Well, yeah. So like in broader terms, then, talking about like this all happening right now and seeing, big names move over, and you were talking earlier about like There's a rumor that maybe Nick Merckx is also going to make a similar move.
Man, can I read you the quote? It's so
Yeah, sure.
okay. I can't tell you guys too much about everything, but I signed the biggest deal of my life. The biggest deal by far. This kind of deal that it's not about you anymore. It's about your family and friends. You know, I signed a big contract, man. A curse word, big one. You guys are gonna love it. I can't go into details yet, but soon. It's not like it's a great time to have a baby, but I'd say next year if I had to guess. I want to just be able to tell you guys, but I can't. Just know I love you guys no matter where we end up. And no matter what we are doing, I'm going to work my ass off. Just know any decision I make is best for me and my family.
He's going to revive Mixer. That's my theory. He's single-handedly bringing it back.
Phoenix from the ashes. Yeah, Microsoft's up. I still can't get over how they shut down that platform, man. That was crazy. Like, people basically had jobs there, and then over the course of maybe less than a week, found out they just weren't working there. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. And the aftermath of Mixer was people reflecting on how you can't buy a community, you can't bring them over to another platform. But what do you think about is that same thing happening now with YouTube, or much different?
I think YouTube's not trying to do that. It's so interesting how we think of YouTube bringing. Let's talk about user acquisition, right? Because you bring up a really great point. There's this comparison that happens a lot of times between people going to Twitch or people going to YouTube. The hardest problem for Twitch has always been user acquisition, right? It's getting new people on the platform and adopting them. For YouTube, they don't have that problem. They've got 2 billion users. So I don't think that YouTube is ever making a decision to bring a broadcaster over oh, we need these viewers. I don't think they care about that. I think that they'll do it for 2 reasons. One is because they identify that broadcaster as a person who can put on a lot of events and make things happen. So, for example, DrLupo has been very prolific with things like St. Jude's. He's been in a lot of charity streams. He's been involved with Twitch at a pretty high level to run a bunch of shows. You've also seen Courage and Valkyrie are those types of people. So the events thing I think is a big deal. And then I think the second thing is what Nathan alluded to a while back was culture. And if you look at the acquisitions that they've made recently with DrLupo and TimtheTatman, those are people that can play with existing creators on the platform and establish a collaborative community of people playing FPS games. And that's no coincidence, right? So they're trying to build in that vulnerability that Nathan mentioned before, which is that you do look at a YouTube chat right now, and it just doesn't have the sort of memeology that Twitch does, or if it does, a lot of that has been sourced from Twitch. So I think they're trying to build their own culture on top of a strong group of leaders who can create events and things happening on the platform.
Right. But yeah, and so I mean, I think the kind of inverse of the question that we've been asking so far of what does this mean for YouTube as a growing competitor to Twitch, is what, if anything, does this mean for Twitch? Because Twitch is, obviously still the place to be for live streaming. And so, yeah, they lost a couple big names, but there are a couple big names who are not even what DrLupo's in the top 200 or something. And then TimtheTatman is somewhere in the top 20, but not in the top 10 in terms of hours watched. So, they took a blow, but not a huge one from a numbers standpoint. However, there is the cultural element again, because like you said, DrLupo is somebody who's really well known for all of his charity events. He does all these record-breaking charities. He brings, I think, a lot of goodwill and just kind of positive public perception to Twitch that they would not have without somebody like him. And then meanwhile, TimtheTatman is just kind of, he's like an establishment. And so you have those two, and they can now pair up with with Courage and Dr. Disrespect and people like that, and kind of become more than the sum of their parts. They can also, work with people like Valkyrie and that whole group of folks. And so does that in the long run maybe hurt Twitch more than it seems like it would, just based on the fact that they've lost a couple people, which in the grand scheme of things is not that huge for them?
It's not that huge. I think what has to happen to hurt Twitch is the perception for new gaming creators has to be, I have a better shot at making it on YouTube than I do on Twitch. And I don't think we're close to that outcome. I put that at 1 to 3 years. I think that Twitch maintains the kingship, right? But I think that YouTube keeps crawling up And then the other one, I don't know to what degree we're discussing it in the context of this show, but man, Facebook is insane too. People are sleeping on Facebook. I need to make a whole video on how much people are sleeping on Facebook. It's
Mhm.
unreal. The best place for a small creator is full stop to start on Facebook. And then the multi-stream on YouTube, which is a huge advantage that everybody ignores, like for small creators, is that Twitch exclusivity through affiliate program. Basically, like once you have 5 to 10 viewers and you somehow sign that contract, you've essentially agreed to throw yourself onto Twitch only. But you can have an infinite amount of viewers on YouTube or Facebook, and you would never need to do that kind of exclusivity. So there, you can take advantage of both platforms. Hell, you can take advantage of 10 platforms. And that's a massive upside for creators. So right now it's an education thing. People think of Twitch first to market, and it really has. If there's anything that's taught me, it's like, man, if you're a first mover and you own that market for enough years, it's unbelievably hard to shake people out of that, because there's no there's no logic to starting a Twitch stream these days. Like if you're
Mhm.
a brand new creator, it just doesn't make any sense. So like YouTube and Facebook are just such more discoverable platforms that make so much more sense. So like outside of education from like weird channels no one watches like mine, I don't know how that transition happens other than like success stories starting to come from the inherent advantages of discoverability that happen on Facebook and YouTube.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, right. I mean, like that upper strata of Twitch streamers is just like so calcified, right? And like they're the ones that command the majority of the viewership. And so yeah, it's just like, what are your odds of actually making it into even like the mid tier of streamers at this point, really? Like if you start a brand new Twitch channel and like don't have an outside source of viewership, don't have like in it, because that's the other thing with Twitch, right? Is that like a lot of the discoverability increasingly seems to happen like off platform. Like people
Yeah.
will make, successful TikToks and then they can funnel that into their Twitch channel. Things like that, where like Twitch is almost for a lot of people. And I think maybe this wraps around to what you were saying about YouTube's proposed idea for streaming, is that Twitch is like an engagement platform
Yeah.
for a lot of
Mhm.
people, where they already made content that was successful elsewhere. And it's sort of like, hey, if you want to come get to know me better, then come watch me on Twitch. But it's not like it's not the discoverability pipeline. It's not like where people
Right.
find out about you.
And a lot of people now are using it as top to funnel, right? So like for example, when we saw a lot of only a lot of people with Patreon type platforms that were encouraging viewers to go to those places, to go to paid platforms, right? From Twitch, like Twitch became a funnel for a lot of the top users to go to paid platforms recently over the course like the last 3 to 4 months, like great success, right? Like creators like Amaranth have done that to a huge degree.
Hmm.
And do you know about a stat called the viewer ratio? This is my favorite stat for this conversation.
Hmm. I don't think I do. So explain
Okay.
your favorite stat.
So viewer ratio is for every one streamer on the platform, how many average viewers are there? Okay.
Oh
So
yeah.
so
Yep.
so um so the looking at this stat over time gives us a very good idea of how saturated the streamer market is on Twitch. So about 3 to 4, maybe 5-ish years ago, this stat was about like 1 in 50. So for every one streamer on Twitch, there was about 50 viewers available in a pool. Now, keep in mind, not all of them were watching distributed streamers. That's not an average, right? So
Mhm.
it just, but maybe a lot of those were stacked up on top, like Ryan says, right? Like is one of the problems on Twitch. But that's the distributed number of potential available viewers. So today, that number as an average across the website is less than 1 in 20, which means that the amount of broadcasters, about 9.5 million broadcasters who click the start streaming button every month, has greatly exceeded the growth of the available viewership. And that creates a sort of feast or famine situation where there just aren't enough viewers to go around. And it's like that weird, awkward high school party you go to where there's no girls there. And you're like, I've made a terrible mistake. Right. Like, and so, and like, as a result, like, it becomes that much more exponentially harder to build a career. Right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right. Because like there's just not really, again, there aren't that many people to go around to actually show up and even watch your channel in the first place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I find that interesting though, because I feel like we are hitting the point where a lot of people now, streaming is like accepted as something that people do, as opposed to like this weird nerd niche. It is a like career where you could talk about it to probably, you know, a decent number of people in the street, and they'd be like, yeah, I have a rough idea of what live streaming is. You hop on a camera and maybe you play some video games or whatever. But at the same time, we're also hitting a point where the main platform for it no longer necessarily allows for new people to turn it into a career, even as people around them would be like, yeah, it sounds, you know, potentially viable. You could probably do that as something, you know, to make money. So it's just interesting to me that those things are overlapping. Or like acceptance is at an all-time high, viability is at like is kind of
At an all-time
decreasing.
low. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's such a great insight because like when I think of the creator economy, which I define to as like people that are creating content or creating things to be able to like make supplemental income. The problem with Twitch is it's not like Etsy or like OfferUp where if I do a lot of business like education, I guess I would call it. I
Mhm.
try to teach people about um that. And so one of the things that comes up a lot is like, hey, like I have no skills, like how do I make money, like how do I like do something? And I would never recommend somebody like unironically start a Twitch stream to make supplemental income, right? But I would recommend like somebody go to like a pawn shop, buy some like cheap stuff, and then resell it on OfferUp for a 40% markup. That's like super realistic for anybody to do, right? And so like when I think of like the gig slash creator economy, um Twitch doesn't stand out as like one of those platforms to make supplemental income on. And like the reason that's relevant is like we have to accept that the vast majority of people will not come into Twitch making thousands and thousands of dollars a month and like just completely replacing their full-time job. But also more importantly, they won't even partially do that. Like they'll never even hit the $100 mark to break the thing that Twitch pays you for, right? They'll just like it won't be a good source of supplemental income. And so I don't think live streaming on Twitch and I think YouTube right now and Facebook even still contributes to that sort of global creator economy. It's just not a viable thing to do to make a little bit of extra money. It's too hard. It's just it's too inaccessible. You have to dedicate an enormous amount to brand building to make it work.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is wild.
it
Um,
is. Yeah.
but I mean, I think it also speaks to something that you talk about quite a lot, which is that any sort of creator, especially if they're like a streamer, needs to diversify like their income sources and like how they're doing all of this anyway. Because like I think that we are long past the point where people could be like, I'm just a one thing, I'm just a YouTuber, I'm
Mhm.
just a streamer, whatever. Like they
Exactly.
have to kind of be all of it. And like, you know, maybe they'll devote most of their focus to a couple things, which I think is the smart way to do it, because otherwise you're spread too thin. um, but to really like maximize any of it, and also to make sure that like, for example, you know, a platform like Twitch, if they decide to change some element of how you're getting paid or whatever, and that's like your whole income,
Exactly.
uh-oh, now you're in
Or you're
trouble.
demonetized like Amaranth was, right? Like or anything
Right.
like that. Yeah. I think another really big thing that I'd actually never brought up in any videos was the sheer percentage that Twitch takes versus like Facebook right now. I'm pretty sure this is right. Somebody can correct me. Gives you 100% of everything you get, or
I
if
think
it,
that's for partners
it's
only,
for
maybe.
partners.
They, yeah, I
So,
think
but
so. I remember reading something about that. I could be
uh,
wrong.
I,
Somebody in chat correct me and tell me I'm an idiot.
also tell me I'm an idiot. Yeah, there's I made a video called Twitch is a Pimp, which is a phenomenal video. And it's about all of the percentage takes that every platform does, showing that Twitch is like by far for creators the highest percentage. So like if all you did, man, I'm gonna get some phone calls, but if all you did was be like, hey, don't subscribe to me on Twitch and like give them the 50%, go over to Patreon that takes 8% and I get 92% of the income versus 50%. And like you've just immediately doubled your income. And like at some point, I've got to think that creators get wise to stuff like this. And YouTube also um, is making plays like this as well, where the percentage takes total off of just like various things are just less, right? They're just like less than bits, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, it's just one of the, I mean, even YouTube does a better split, right, than Twitch does. YouTube has the 70/30, although it, I guess, takes a while to earn your way into that. You've got to stream for a lot of hours before they give you access to that, I think I read. But in any case, I think that the other thing that's sort of turning a lot of people onto this, at least recently, is also the discussion around like hate raids and stuff. Because you've had a lot of people talk about how, you know, in addition to the fact that they are dealing with hate raids, which are terrible, they're also like, well, if you're going to like subject me to this, then at least pay me better, because 50-50 is a pretty terrible split.
Or can I unpack that? God,
Oh, yeah,
like
go
so
for it.
passionate about that stuff. Sorry. Like, I think that is one of the biggest points actually, is that from a once you get integrated into Twitch at like enough of a level that you're listening to the news around it, you start to realize that Twitch is like, despite being a 6,000 person company, is like outside of like one guy, like there's just like DJ Wheat, like just Marcus, like sitting there like, hi, like I'm gonna talk to you guys now. There's just no, everybody at Twitch is just like a stone wall, you know.
Mhm.
Versus then I go on to like Susan, the CEO of YouTube, when Lupo came on, was like, hey, welcome aboard. Just made a tweet. It takes 5 seconds. But how many of those have we seen from Emmett? How many of those have we seen from Sarah, right, the COO? It never happens. Nobody at Twitch talks, and so you get these situations like hate raids, and then people are like Twitch, and they're like, September, guys, want to get some subs? You can subscribe right now for 20%. You know, like, and you just don't get this feeling. Whereas, like, I this is a really interesting thought exercise. Everyone else go search at Fliz on Twitter and go to tweets and replies, and you will see the guy that is the head of YouTube Gaming Live, an executive with Google stock who is killing it, replying to 50 viewer streamers all day, and it's like that will catch up. That will catch up with Twitch for sure. They're not talking to people.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, that's been the whole like center of every movement surrounding hate raids so far, right? Has been like asking Twitch to do better. And even that, it took them days to actually get a reply out. And when they did, it was very insubstantial. And like in some ways out of necessity, because if they tipped their hand to people who are running hate raids, then it makes it easier for the people doing that to, you know, change their tactics and continue to make things bad. But at the same time, it's just like they keep giving these like very blasé blanket statements. And then streamers are naturally like, well, what are you doing for me now? Like, if I don't know that you're doing anything for me now, given the severity of this issue, you may as well not be doing anything at all. And so like that lack of communication, like you're saying, it just, it builds in both ways. If people are doing it, then over time it pays off. If people aren't doing it, then over time it leads to this broader community resentment. And resentment is really hard to come back from because there are always echoes of it, right? Anytime that there's a new controversy or a new issue, people call back to the previous thing and they're like, yeah, you were also inactive then. You were also inactive then. And like, it just never stops building after a certain point. And I think that's kind of the loop that Twitch finds itself in now. And so it's interesting too that this was the same week that TimtheTatman and DrLupo left is also the same week that a bunch of people did a day off Twitch. And like, so you had those conversations overlapping, even though they weren't really very related. When I talked to DrLupo, he did mention that one of his, like, that he, in leaving, was considering systemic issues on Twitch and his own misgivings with the platform, and specifically mentioned hate raids as like an outcropping kind of the things that he's seen. And the way that, like, for him, a big priority in his own streaming career is to keep gaming as this like diverse and inclusive thing. And the fact that Twitch is kind of failing on that front was, you know, it was not something that he loved about being associated with that platform.
So do you feel like creators are making these decisions to move partially because of these sort of like this sort of underlying feeling that Twitch is also not? Did you get that perception from a lot of the people you've talked to?
Wait, sorry. Can you ask that question again? I zoned out.
Yeah. So like essentially like you've mentioned that DrLupo kind of specifically mentioned hate raids, and also like, is your feeling that a lot of creators are making decisions to move to YouTube Live because of that underlying resentment that's building?
I think that a lot of people saw the DrLupo and TimtheTatman stuff happen this week, and that increased their interest in something like YouTube. Whereas before they would not have been considering that so much. It made them start saying, like, in some cases openly and publicly, like, hey, should I check out YouTube? Should I give that a try? Like, is that maybe the next step for me, given how things are happening over here? And then beyond that, you've also had a lot of overlapping conversations between, you know, the like a day off Twitch and Twitch do better stuff with, again, like payment. And the other thing that a lot of people have been encouraging within that movement is like having people subscribe to you off Twitch. So using services like Patreon and like Coffee and Fan House and stuff like that, as opposed to Twitch directly, because those things give you better payouts. And again, because like for some people, you know, their calculus is they don't want money to be given to Twitch anymore because they're mad about how Twitch is handling everything. So they're like, well, sub to me elsewhere so Twitch doesn't get that money.
Yeah, so I actually interacted a little bit on this with the hate raid organizers, and I made a video called "Protesting on Twitch," which I think they're very passionate people, and but like they just don't know the back end of like how Twitch they do now, right? But like the original protest was set up to like be offline. But in reality, in a very weird way, that benefits Twitch because most of Twitch's major expenses are server costs. So, and most of those expenses are incurred by smaller broadcasters who don't make back of that income and sub money, etc. Right? So, this protest targeted smaller creators leaving the platform, which was basically a day like, oh, good, we get to dust off our servers today, right? Like, you know, that kind of thing. And I argued that it would be a much better thing to have all of those broadcasters stream at the same time for like 24 to 48 hours with a bullet point list of what they want changed. And like and then simultaneously doing something like you mentioned, which is like okay, let's say, hey, sub to Patreon, like that's a much more like meaningful move. Like there are people reporting that the protest movement was successful because supposedly the whole platform dropped 1 million CCVs yesterday. I take a lot of issue with that, and we can get into why, but like at the end of the day, 1 million CCVs off Twitch for one day makes no difference, assuming that that's even true, right? The subs still roll and everything goes on as normal today, you know?
Sure. Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I would argue that what they did in this particular case was more impactful in a broader way than that. In that, for one, what they engaged in was something that was immediately, basically, the triumph of that movement was media coverage, was mainstream media coverage specifically, because they engaged in something that is broadly legible to mainstream media, which is functionally a strike. People in media know how to cover that. They know what it looks like. They know how to talk to people about it. And so they know how to like get articles up about it. And between mainstream media coverage and people talking about it on Twitter, it made a lot of noise. It was a like defining conversation around Twitch during the same week that, again, the platform lost 2 major creators. And yet like there were more tweets and stuff about a day off Twitch than there were about like DrLupo and YouTube gaming. And that unto itself, especially when it's a ton of small streamers, like it's there, you know, if anything, a lot of bigger streamers were being like, I don't know if this is going to work. And yet you had all these small streamers manage to band together and make more noise than them. And like that is unusual on a top heavy platform like Twitch. You don't usually have smaller streamers able to pull off that kind of like, you know, major and impactful collective action. And so I think something like what you're talking about, it would definitely be good down the line. But I think as an opening salvo, this made more sense because it got more people who don't understand Twitch's inner workings clued into what was going on.
So is your take that the protest was actually really pretty successful then for what it tried to set out to accomplish?
I think so, yeah, because I think that the ultimate goal of it was to, you know, again, get people's attention, make people notice, and also ensure that like after, you know, the first couple weeks of this thing, people didn't just like drift away back to not caring anymore. Like they managed to demonstrate that a lot of people care. And again, they got a lot of coverage from like major mainstream outlets in addition to gaming focused outlets, which is very hard to do, especially when it comes to smaller streamers. Smaller streamers just don't usually break through in that way. So yeah, I think that for what they set out to do, using, you know, mechanisms that are more traditional in terms of like protest and in terms of collective action, they pulled off something pretty huge. I think that you, from a pure number standpoint, you just can't really deny that.
That's really cool. You've changed my opinion on that.
Sorry, somebody in chat was like, Devin doesn't agree. I'm like,
yeah, no,
Devin
does agree.
So
I mean, like, believe it or not, like people could have an informed discussion and then come out of it with a different idea than they had before. Yeah, but particularly because Nathan is incredibly knowledgeable in protesting. You're so knowledgeable. You got locked in a garage once.
You're not wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. He's been through. I mean, like, if Nathan has a take on like, particularly the value here to pay attention to is that media perspective, right? Is that like setting up something so that media understands it is something I never considered, because when news articles and people can be like, oh, like, okay, we get that, we're gonna write about that because we understand this topic, that becomes that much more of a amplifier,
Right.
and then those media channels are the ones that executives like take a look at and go,
They
oh,
super do.
yes,
But yeah, no, I mean, especially because
Mhm.
coverage like that impacts mainstream perception of everything else, because that's the main thing that the mainstream in this week is seeing about Twitch in general.
Mhm.
And like, if that's the one thing that like some random person or an executive or whatever, or somebody like with a lot of money takes away about Twitch when they
Yeah.
don't normally pay attention to Twitch at all, like that's their perception kind of forever. That's their first impression. That's just like what they think of the
Yeah.
platform. Like, oh, it's, got all these problems with racism. So I don't know if I want to go near that. Seems like a minefield. But then yeah, just beyond that, I think that again they did a good job of kind of gaining the sort of mind share that smaller streamers generally are not able to. So yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by how all of it unfolded, and I think that we will. I think that they're also going to do more stuff in the future that
Oh,
might
they
be more in
will.
line with what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
just because they yeah, go ahead.
That's what they said to me, was that their next thing is going to be more of like a financial hit, and that they
Mhm.
had planned a multi-stage um kind of thing,
Yeah, which you have
like
to.
yeah.
I mean, especially on a platform like Twitch, because the thing that, is always true about Twitch and probably will never change is that because it's a live streaming platform, it's always so focused on the present, right? Like everybody every day is talking about the thing of the day, whether that's drama or some sort of wider conversation or whatever. And then a few days later, it can be like it never happened. Like people don't care about it anymore.
Hmm.
And so it's really hard to hold on to sort of any ongoing conversation like the people who are running a day off Twitch and who first did Twitch do better and all that stuff have managed to do. Like they have been, despite how hectic everything is for them, and like people are fucking getting like doxxed and all this other stuff.
Oh
Um,
man,
yeah. Oh yeah. No. One
I
of
didn't know
the.
that.
Oh yeah. No. It's gotten really bad. One of the people that I originally talked to for my first story is like not replying or like not contributing quotes anymore because she's like, I got doxxed. I just want to. Or no, she got swatted, and it's like
Whoa,
I don't want to. I can't do this anymore. I've got to move.
jeez,
Yeah. Oh,
that's
it's terrible.
brutal.
It's really, really bad. Um, yeah, I've done a
That's
lot of
something.
reporting on it, and it's just heartbreaking because like a bunch of people are getting doxxed now, some people are getting swatted, and like it just doesn't go away. So anytime people go live, it's just
Yeah,
like, and here's a bunch of garbage. You're gonna have a horrible time anyway. Your options are either stream through it or quit.
there's a whole conversation there too about that culture. I wonder how, like, the underlying toxicity of like live stream culture on Twitch is like a topic that's so interesting to me. And there's one particular topic, I don't know if it's in the context of this show, but it's
Mm.
like underage streaming, and like I know you've looked into this probably a little bit, and I don't think anyone has broken an article on this, but like all of the people, all of the kids that like start channels, and they're like on their phone, and they log in and they have zero viewers, and like predators will find these channels. For a long time, if you were to stream IRL, I think they fixed this on the mobile app. It automatically put you in the like sports and outdoors category, which made it very easy for predators to discover tiny like
Mhm.
small children, because they were they would just click the start stream button. They wouldn't change any of the settings. And like there's so many weird stories about like the toxicity and doxing and swatting and things like that. Um, that's a real underlying thing that I think again actually underlines the whole story of like live streaming as a supplemental thing, because I think one of the I mean, I'm recently dealing with um one of the biggest. This is very recent, so I'm gonna have to be like really careful with this. The biggest thing I think in the history that I've ever worked of like this a very popular dungeon master. who was
Hmm.
running games for a dozen people live. This is like a predominantly live show. Basically had no like external presence like anywhere else. But so this is just all live stuff, like live collaborations. Like we found out, 20 women came forward plus, saying
Hmm.
that there was all kinds of stories of, and this is like these relationships get created through this like or they get boosted by this live interaction, that creates so many weird parasocial outcomes. And like I think that's again another argument to kind of really look at live streaming and say like, is this w- really like a primary thing for most people realistically? You know,
Hmm.
um, yeah. I don't know how. I'm being careful because I don't know where you want to go with all this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to I guess to clue people in very quickly to what he's talking about.
Mhm.
I mean, is it okay if I do like a quick summary?
Oh, 100%. I'm just like,
Yeah,
because yeah, because I'm so close to it. Like I'm not sure where I should go yet. So yeah, please.
yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, for those, I mean, I imagine a lot of people in chat because you're fans of Devin, you're probably already aware of a lot of this.
Mm.
But there's a streamer named Arcadum who basically it came out again via the accounts of a bunch of different women that this person is an abuser and like someone who has taken advantage of women in a bunch of different really heinous ways. And so y'all cut him pretty much immediately, right? Um,
There was so I was in Las Vegas with my girlfriend, and we're just doing like family time stuff and
mhm.
having fun. I mean, like, yeah, I'm not gonna say, like I was in Vegas, kind of sucked. No, it was awesome, right? Like we were just like going to shows and stuff. And my initial call from him was like, we represented him exclusively, and I was up until that point really happy to do so. Like, I mean, he was building a living world of thousands of people. Nothing like that had ever happened in Dungeons and Dragons, and it was amazing. And I was a part of it. I had joined games. I had been a leader in that community. I had helped build the Patreon. I built a lot of the financial stuff. And he had called us and told us a story um, that was basically less than 1% of like what actually happened. I mean, it was like, and like I told him like outright, I'm like, Arcade, I'm like, the one guy you don't want to lie to is your agent. And I give this conversation to anyone that's in trouble, but I'm like from a PR perspective, you tell me everything, because if you don't, you are really fucked. And like, needless to say, like 2 days later, when that stuff came out, what we were doing is we were setting up a third party investigation, because I thought that was the most realistic thing. Like, if a third party investigation comes and you get a lawyer team to look at it, two outcomes, right? Either one, which is what I thought would happen. We find out what the truth is, and then we just go, yeah, this is the truth. Like, he made a mistake. We back it. And then probably life goes on, right? Because
Mhm.
the initial story that he told me had nothing to do with harassment, had nothing to do with these women, had not a single one of the women that what he told me was mentioned. Like, that
Of
wasn't a thing.
course.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so I figured, okay, no problem. We'll do a third party investigation. We'll release a joint statement. We'll be done with it. We'll move on. I mean, he made a mistake. Okay. Uh, or we'll discern, on the off chance that we discern that there's more truth to it. We might have to have a longer conversation about dropping him as a client.
Hmm.
But once this came out, I mean, Matt, I called Matt at my co-founder at Sevidus at 9:30 at night, which for him is late. But for me, that's like I woke up. But he's like 4 a.m. Like, Jocko Willing, like, let's do it. Like, I called him, and like unanimous in a second. There wasn't even a second of consideration. Like, but Nathan, like the loss that I've taken, like financially, mentally, and emotionally, like, I'm staying up every single night. Like, I've never been that close to something so evil, and like not known it. It's messing with me, man. And it's getting me to think a lot about, like, back on topic, this like concept of like, is live streaming really a thing that we should prioritize primarily in our life? Like, just these long hours, these like the elevation of someone to this like kingship level. My girlfriend has a really good phrase for it. She calls them compromised heroes, right?
Hmm.
Like this idea of like this elevating a person to this like platform where they can interact live and have so much authority, but they're just people.
Right.
And so many times over and over again, we see these cryptocurrency scams on Twitch. It's like a massive thing with a lot of different broadcasters, and like the gambling stuff. Like, we're elevating these people to these levels that we look up to them as like these very accomplished and like put together people, but they keep proving that they're not.
Right.
Whereas like whereas, and this is like the big thing, it's much harder if you have a cohesive brand like Ludwig, like for example, it would be much more difficult for me to believe that he would go down for something like that because it requires so much more effort and work and structure to build that. Like, and I hope that comment doesn't age poorly. Ludwig, don't disappoint me, man. I have a lot of faith in you.
Oh
like,
boy.
like, but you know what I mean? Like it's like that live presence creates this sort of parasocial, like primary relationship that allows predators to succeed at a very high level at influencing people, either towards things like what happened with Arcadum or like massive scams. Like we're seeing like you can mention him. I'm not going to, but one of the most successful broadcasters on Twitch, right? Right? No, actually, I will mention it. Fuck it. Yeah, it's Aiden Ross, right? Like just
Mhm.
was like did tons of cryptocurrency type of stuff that got his audience involved and like literally later said afterward, he's like, yeah, guys, I can't believe like you got left with the bag with that stuff. Like just didn't care. But like over and over again, we see this. Sorry, I need
Yeah.
to get off. This is
No, no. I
crazy.
mean,
Okay. Okay. I'm just really messed up from this. Like it sucks to see this happen over and over again on this platform. And then at the
yeah,
same time, see like it's just so hard for women or anyone that's diverse in any way to get ahead because like they're constantly beholden to these kind of things. I mean, if even
yeah,
the organizer of an event that's not even like a serious influencer can get which I mean like 1,000 concurrent viewers or something can get doxxed, like you said, like it's so fucking messed up.
yeah. No, I mean,
Mhm.
I agree. It is. It is an awkward note, by the way, to transition on, and yet I think that like we need to jump to another segment, but I also think
Oh,
that's like a
yeah, sorry.
very. I mean, I think that's like a heartbreaking and unfortunate statement to end things on, but
Well, I
I
can
don't
wrap it
think
up
you're
real
necessarily
quick
wrong. Um,
if you want.
I
I can
mean,
wrap it up like 2 seconds on what I think the future is for these platforms if you want and take it back. But or we can leave it there if you want to like get a big Washington Post like da 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 like thumbnail. Yeah.
um, well, I think we have another guest that we need to bring on pretty quickly because they do have a pretty hard cap on when they can on when they have to leave.
Yeah, sure.
But in the meantime, very quickly, let people know where to find you.
Oh, sure. There's basically two places. YouTube.com. So the
Mhm,
current website you're on, slash Devin Nash
mhm,
is the really good place. And then actually I have a really live community on my Discord. Discord.gg/Devin
mhm.
is where we have like a lot of ongoing conversations and research and stuff about a lot of the stuff that's going on. So yeah, shout out to the Discord and all the people in there. You guys are awesome, and that's where I live. And also Nathan and Shannon, thank you very much for having me on
Yeah, totally.
and bringing me here. And yeah, sorry I took up all your time.
No, it's all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, but I'd be willing to come back anytime. I'd love to impact stuff, and I promise I won't be as dramatic.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. It was great to
Yeah,
talk
thank
to
you.
you.
Yeah, Shannon, I hope we catch up more later too. Mhm.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
All righty.
how do I leave? Oh, I'm on Discord. Okay, so I just okay. All right, I'll see you guys later. Have a wonderful rest of your show. Thank you so much for
All
being here.
righty.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mm.
Bye. Probably buy like half of Devin's audience too.
Well, if you stick around.
Yeah, we're going to talk about something completely different that you may or may not be interested in. Let's find out. Here, let's just hop over to
Yeah, so Ray
your
can
story.
hop in. Yeah, I just want to be mindful of her time.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
totally, totally. Yeah, people in chat saying.
Like underage kids streaming on Twitch, right? This is
Mhm.
children in China playing video games. So tangentially related. The other thing I wanted to say was like, I think we have like a very North American perspective on Twitch, Facebook gaming, and YouTube.
Mhm.
And those places are banned. Those sites are banned in China. So China
Huh.
has a completely different live streaming landscape. Welcome, Rui. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. Hey, Ray. Thank you for waiting so patiently. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about because so you're a associate at Wilson Center, which focuses on international relations, and I want to talk to you more about Chinese internet censorship, Chinese like policies around video games, and especially specifically this week wrote about a story of like how people under 18 in China can only play for 3 hours a week on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays between the hours of 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. So I guess we could just open it up with, what is your kind of take on this policy?
So this is a policy that, like many in Chinese gaming spaces, is going to be enforced by the gaming companies themselves. While sort of poking around the internet in preparation for talking with y'all today, I went on the official blog of a game that I like to play, Genshin Impact, and they actually had a calendar and explainers on how players could participate in different events and prepare for the implementation of the new policy. So the restrictions on how much money minors were able to spend in games was already policy. However, this new sort of limitation is just the latest in a series of policy restrictions that have been placed on various entertainment sectors in China. The film industry, for example, gets sort of tightened, and certain films don't get broadcast around major holidays. TV broadcasts as well have been subject to censorship. And because internet culture and online culture in China really focuses on virality and popularity, the government is very keenly aware of that and seeks to shape what kind of content users, especially younger users, are consuming.
Yeah, this reminds me of there's a New York Times article about how North Korea didn't want North Korean kids to consume South Korean culture because it would be soft power of feeling being influenced to see South Korea is doing so well and wanting to defect to South Korea, if anything. Do you think this is controlling? This is all about soft power for China, and yeah.
Well, yes and no, because a lot of the content that is getting restricted is produced right at home in China. A lot of Chinese gamers will be playing things that were developed by Chinese studios, which prior to this week's policy were following different types of rules and regulations for media, which were already pretty strict. The politically sensitive usernames would be taken down. Use of in-game chat and comments that were sensitive were removed, and in some cases you also have different types of regulatory changes. Going back to Genshin, I logged onto my account this June, and around June 4th, they removed the capability for users to change their avatar name and their description. So you couldn't say anything related to June 4th around that date. So these features are already more or less sort of baked into how video game companies do business. But now we're seeing a turn towards, more and more proactive policy suggestions towards the content of the games themselves and how they interact with customers.
Yeah, so for our viewers, June 4th is a reference to Liao, which is the Tiananmen Square incident or massacre, depending on how you describe it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's when the tanks rolled in the Chinese army, and there was that famous photo of the tank man, the man who stood in the way of the tanks, and we don't know what happened to him to this day. So that was kind of not taught as much in Chinese history. But I think my international friends do have some kind of awareness of it, though. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of give that context, and you can definitely feel free to add to my definition or correct it.
Yes.
Okay, great. I also saw on Twitter that Chinese kids cannot, ship or promote two relationships of two celebrities anymore.
Wait, what?
Yeah, there's a
They're
lot of
not allowed to do
restrictions.
that?
So celebrity scandals have also been a sort of hot news item within China. There was a very high-profile sexual assault case against a Chinese-Canadian music artist, Chris Wu. and also somebody that's more pertinent to, I guess, my millennial generation, a popular actress named Zhao Wei was her name was effectively scrubbed, including from a drama that she was the title character in. And so right now, the sort of celebrity identity is something that is kind of controversial, and maybe instead, and this could have been an opportunity to address corruption, which is happening in part for other types of policy, or sexual assault and gender politics. The designated problem is celebrity itself, and fan cultures as a result are likely to see further tightening. But again, this isn't the first case of fans and geek culture in China being at the receiving end of regulatory scrutiny or content removal. More broadly, LGBTQ posters have had this sort of spotty relationship with social media companies for quite some time, including this year when queer groups were taken off of social media platforms. So these were officially registered groups at many of China's biggest universities. We're also seeing, more and more restrictions on, effeminate men on TV and in cultural products, and other types of sort of new standards for what content young people and the general public are consuming in media. So this is just the latest in a sort of series of more suggestions and guidance by authorities, and subsequently by the technology and entertainment companies that are kind of deputized in this process in making those content changes.
So what is the kind of overarching goal of all of this? Like, why are all of these rules and regulations going into place around these specific industries?
Well, what's also happening at the same time is we're seeing the formalization of Xi Jinping thought getting put into schools. We're seeing a rise in, overall nationalism that is sort of snowballing as a result in the general populace. But also, I think the sort of cultural direction of China is something that I think the government is more and more interested in. Yeah, you see this in different politicians' speeches. You see this sort of moral guidance language in state media when they announce things like the video game hourly restrictions. And in scrolling through different types of comments in the announcement section, people who are nationalistic tend to be okay. They can use that time to study. They can use that time to, better improve the country. It's like we support this because children need to, be productive. So I think there is a sense of, guidance and towards having a certain identity and having certain character traits. It's just, we're very early in the stages of, I think, the carrots and sticks being offered to people that have previously been able to make more choices in what they consume and how much they consume in terms of pop culture.
Yeah. I also seem to recall China was, cracking down on rappers and hip hop and people with piercings on TV as well in the past few years.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also the attitude towards video games, you might see that not just in China. Like if you look at the comments on this article, for instance, a lot of them are like from Americans saying, "Good for China, good for them. They're gonna crush Americans in 20 years with how smart these future kids will grow up to be." So there is some kind of like anti-video game sentiment that is out there among a certain generation of people.
Yeah, and part of it, I'm gonna be honest, is this weird stereotype that, you know, Chinese Asian kids are fine with studying for like 30 billion hours a day, which, I mean, Chinese kids like are not robots. Newsflash. But the sort of issue of, you know, what kind of sort of political socialization and what kind of, you know, cultural socialization is going to result from this. Because as of today, September 2nd, 2021, Xi Jinping will have been in office for 8 years. He started in office in 2013. And so we've already seen about 8 years of him sort of solidifying his political power and sort of codifying certain ways to do things in government. And so we're already starting to see, you know, college age and young adult, like mid-20s people sort of already reflect that kind of nationalistic sentiment. This isn't something that's necessarily generational within China, but, you know, young people are impressionable, and what they consume and how they consume information really shapes their political identity. So I think overall, in the longer term, that the development of political identities within the general public is definitely in the cards for the government here.
Yeah, and Xi Jinping also, you know, extended his term limits, right? He like abolished them, so he doesn't have to leave office ever.
He does not have term limits. So
yeah. So
and it also happened after he removed, you know, most of his political rivals. So
yeah, I mean, I think there's a comment that you just scrolled by, which was like, everybody can't play Winnie the Pooh anymore or something in the video game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot of like, there's some kind of subtle mockery of Xi Jinping even within China, of like some internet users calling him like Winnie the Pooh and like saying he looks like Winnie the Pooh. And I wonder if you could speak to, you know, like, there are people who are able to like stand up against him, right? And there are people who are criticizing him, and then but they just don't want other people to do it.
Yeah, well, definitely not without risk. There was a woman, I think, a couple of years ago who threw an ink bottle at one of his photos, and we still don't know where she is. So it's not like overt direct criticism of Xi Jinping is not something that people can expect to do while they're in China and not face any types of consequences. Having said that, I think typically when people do criticize policies like this, they try to do so in a sort of hedged, almost subtweet sort of way. There were a lot of sarcastic comments like, well, I guess the teens will just go back to Douyin, which is Chinese TikTok, same parent company, or like, you know, they'll just listen to music and like, you know, scroll through their phones in a way that says, you know, this gaming restriction, you know, this is not going to starve children of electronics access when so many people are glued to their smartphones anyway. So when the criticism does come out, it typically is more sort of muted. It's definitely not going to name names of political actors and government actors that people might be mad at. This was true during COVID. It was true, you know, during various political changes within China. It's true now during this new gaming change.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's a really good point. Wait, did I cut you off?
Oh no.
Okay. Yeah, actually I had a thought. Oh, yeah, this all like ties back to the stuff we did about Twitch at the beginning of the stream, because if everybody can only game for 3 hours a week, that's like a huge blow to the Chinese esports industry. All the young athletes are, you know, practicing for hours from a young age are no longer able to do that unless they were able to break the rules somehow with like their parents helping them out. And then they might turn to like Douyi or like Bilibili, like to like watch streaming content instead, which I think aren't those like the Chinese streamers who are like the top streamers are incredibly wealthy now, right? And they're watched by many, and they have made like luxurious lifestyles out of their careers of streaming, much like they do here.
Yeah, and influencers, I think, are another sort of area that are coming under scrutiny. Streaming standards for Douyin, for Bilibili, and for other sites are they're underway. They're also being revised. Like, oh, you can't wear certain outfits on stream. You have to behave in a way that is like dignified. Certain types of, I think this one kid like made a bunch of short videos like making fun of teachers, and then later there was a very abrupt change to his videos and he stopped making fun of teachers in his short videos. So influencer culture is alive and well in China. I still think that when they're able to, Chinese internet commenters can be incredibly funny in sort of making fun of news events and making fun of different types of gaming and pop culture happenings. But streamers and esports folks, I don't know if esports people will be able to get some kind of exception to be able to train as as potential high achieving talents. But the sort of web presence of people that consume gaming content it's a big question. As for the corporations themselves, well, Tencent has to get government approval to publish any games, and they in the past they have had those licenses frozen, sometimes for extended periods of time. So this is very much a quid pro quo relationship between gaming companies and the government, which is why you sometimes do see gaming companies just go ahead and proactively like prevent people from changing their descriptions around June 4th, or proactively setting out the standards for their minors and like blocking certain financial transactions, so on and so forth.
Well, yeah. So there are like, I've been doing some reading on it, and there are like some ways around some of these restrictions, right? For example, people can use like their parents' accounts or older siblings' accounts, things like that. And then like the other thing that was really staggering to me that puts all of this in perspective is that like the number of gamers in China is like twice the number of the population of the United States, right? Like it's this enormous number.
Yes.
And it's one of these things where like people think, oh, this is something that's happening to video games over there, whatever, not a huge deal. And it's like, no, there's a bigger video game industry, at least in terms of pure like consumption potential in China than there is in the US, which is why so many game companies are so interested in China.
Mm-hmm. And it took a very long time for Western and non-Chinese gaming companies like Valve, which only launched like a sort of partially open Steam store in China, and also Nintendo recently launched the Switch in China, but not with the full library that it might have here in the United States. And so, as online gaming is cracked down on, I'm sure that overseas companies that are accessing the Chinese market or intend to access the Chinese market are asking themselves a lot of questions about risk and reward. But that's true of any business operating with interactions with the Chinese supply chain and market right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, I read that for the PlayStation 5 launching in China, one of the only games they had approved was Genshin Impact, which you can play for free on your phone.
You
play
can
anywhere. So it's like,
although,
why would I?
as a PS5 version Genshin Impact player, it looks really nice and it loads really fast.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not sure which Sony titles might make it over, which they probably should, because it's a fairly hefty investment, and I'm assuming it costs a lot as an imported console in China. So
yeah, oh yeah. And then when I went to China in 2018, like even like Apple products were a little bit more expensive than they would be here, just from like the import tax.
Yeah, but a lot. If we looked at the total number of gamers in China, I would bet that most would play on phone or tablet.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, and that gets back to the point of like why? Because China banned consoles for over 14 years and they only unbanned them in 2015. So that has like really influenced
Mm-hmm.
Chinese gamers like habits. I talked to some friends, they only have played on their phone. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I played a game on my phone one time." Like, does that make me a gamer? I don't know.
Yeah, which I think has led to the sort of flourishing of mobile sort of development. I mean, so many Chinese studios are developing right out of the box for mobile instead of PC or for console. When you look at titles released, although with joint ventures and investments, that I guess that sort of changes the game because they don't have to put so much overhead if they're collaborating with a studio that's done console development before.
Right. I think we covered this a little bit, but Matthew Rayner in chat just asked, how realistically effective is this 3-hour enforcement? Like, won't there be widespread bypassing of the barrier? I mean, there already kind of has been
Yeah.
in various ways with previous restrictions, right? Like,
Well,
people use VPNs for Steam. Like, they just find their own ways around.
yeah. Well, VPNs are technically illegal in China, so it depends on how savvy you are and if you're willing to pay for a VPN. But a lot of censorship is making it a little harder to access, and by just making things a little harder to access, you tamp down on the numbers of people doing it. So in terms of gaming, it's how nice are your parents to you? Because it's like Chinese parents, again, just like Chinese kids aren't robots, Chinese parents are not all tiger moms. And so a lot of them will be like, all right, I need my kid to stop bothering me for 2 hours. Take my account, play some I don't know, League or something.
Yeah. Play some Wild Rift on mobile. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we like went over a lot of it. I just kind of wondered, what do you think like the overall impact of this would be? Actually, when I first saw this news, I brought it up to my friend, and then she's from Sichuan province, and she's like, not surprised at all. And I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised either. And then we were just discussing like, why are we not surprised? So I wonder if you want to like tackle that first before we talk about the impact.
Well, I think that civil society in China has always sort of had this type of regulation, the tightening, and also the government being proactive about what identities it encourages. It's always had this looming over it. And so within China, you have people who are able to, create a lot of sometimes subversive things, and a lot of stories that can go against the grain, but it all happens under an environment where things may or may not be permissible to create, to watch, to analyze, so on and so forth. Like for instance, Chinese television. If you really think about Chinese historicals, a lot of them will only look at history of certain time periods. Does that mean that people aren't capable of making historical TV dramas about every single time period in Chinese history? No, there's a lot of really good writers, directors, actors. But what can get broadcast? That is where it's the catch comes in. And the same goes for video games, the same goes for influencers and live streamers, and the same goes for all aspects of digital society in China and civil society more broadly.
Yeah, and one thing I would just mention from that is like I was talking to my friend a lot about this, but when like under Gorbachev, when the Soviet Union fell, I think the Communist Party of China was taking notes, and they were still like trying to think about how can we make sure this empire, this like dictatorship doesn't fall, this regime doesn't fall, soon due to Western influence, or how does it like keep going for forever, and then these kinds of rules get introduced over time in this kind of landscape.
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of marriage of globalization, but also a very purpose-driven government with political ideology that it needs to sustain. And that has been true for Deng Xiaoping, who was the leader of China during the 1989 Tiananmen Square incident. It's been true for leaders after that, and it's definitely true for Xi Jinping now.
Yeah. And cool. I guess we can just wrap up with, where do you think things go from here?
Where I think things go from here is I'm really curious to see the sort of formation of political identities by Chinese young people. So that's going to be a sort of medium to long term question. And so for me, like seeing how nationalism plays out in business sectors, it's certainly capable of playing out in entertainment. And celebrity culture. We've already had celebrities come out in droves to say, we support the Hong Kong police, we support the Hong Kong national security law during protester crackdowns in 2020 and this year in 2021. And so I think we'll see more celebrities that are really leaning into the patriotism and love for the motherland. Influencers likely as well.
Yeah, one of those celebrities was actually like the actress from Disney's Mulan live action
Yes.
film.
Even though she's American.
Yeah.
She has an American passport. I was like, whoa, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that definitely stirred up some controversy over like, should people even watch this film at this point? Like, or is it boycotting? But then it didn't even get good reviews. So
No, it wasn't very. It was very poorly timed as a film, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's also just not a very entertaining film.
Yeah,
but
the pacing is like going through molasses.
Yeah, yeah. It was trying to be a lot of things. But okay, yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate like your perspective that you bring to all of this. Like it's so easy to dunk on China for like being China, but then to like get more context around it too is
No, there's always a lot of sort of details when you look at what's happening in country.
Yeah. Thanks, Ray.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Now it's time for the last part of the show. Although I think we might do I'm not sure if our video person is going to take us to a be right back screen or if we're going to just roll right into the next thing. So let's just take a quick moment to chill just in case. And then, okay, dope. Yeah, so now I'm just going to run through kind of some of the big stories, the other big stories that have happened this week, just in the interest of discussing them and talking about them. And so, yeah, to start that off, originally, I was going to focus quite a lot on kind of, a day off Twitch and hate raids and stuff. But we kind of already covered that to a pretty great degree, right? We talked about that with Devin. So I think we can sort of skip over that a little bit. Let's see. So the other big story that I wanted to dive into off the back of all of that is something that I think like was very interesting to me last week, but a lot of people didn't really talk about so much, which is that, if we want to talk about video games and governments again, which I guess we do, the video game engine company, Unity, which basically they make an engine that is the kind of back end of a lot of fairly popular video games, has also been doing some military contracting. And that apparently came as something of a shock to a lot of people who work at Unity, which is not ideal because if you are in a position where you're making something and then you only find out after the fact that it's going to be used by a large militaristic body that you may or may not agree with the various pursuits of, that doesn't rule is the short version. And so Patrick Klepek at Vice did a lot of reporting on this, basically again kind of talking to various employees who found this revelation to be pretty disturbing. And then shortly after that, as a result of this story, I think the CEO of Unity, John Rositiello, kind of addressed the company on this topic and had a very interesting take on it, to say the least, which is that he said that their work will never lead to the loss of life, which is a pretty amazing way to put it when you're working with the US military. Like the kind of basic calculus of it is, will it because I think what he was trying to say is it'll never directly lead there. Like we're not going to, they're not going to make something that will directly make it easier for somebody to kill somebody else. They're not going to like, it's not going to be like Unity made a gun. Like that's not going to happen. But what they are doing is creating technology employed by one of the largest militaries in the entire world. And so will that directly lead to the loss of life? Probably not. At least not the way that he's putting it. But will it indirectly lead to the loss of life? I mean, of course, it's what the military does. And so like it's obviously a pretty morally tricky thing. And by that I mean like this framing that the CEO of the company uses is just it's not really fully honest in my opinion. Like it's one of those things where if you're going to do this, you kind of got to own it, right?
Also, just like saying, "Oh, we don't do things that lead to direct loss of life." Like, I mean, that should go without saying. So, I don't really know what you're saying there.
Right. Well, and also it's like, people asked about what they're working on. Like a lot of employees are curious if Unity has worked on projects surrounding the simulation of using weapons, weaponized vehicles, training to harm other people, etc. And this response is, well, training soldiers to do what? We definitely work on training. We don't work on things that involve direct loss of life. Training soldiers is a little broad. There are a lot of humanitarian things soldiers train to do. There's a lot of things you can train soldiers in, but training drones to kill people, no. But like he deflected the question in like 8 different directions and never really directly answered it. And then was like, and we're not training drones. And it's like, well, that was never the question. The question was about soldiers, buddy. Yeah, it's just like it's very messy, but it's also one of those things where there's been, I think, an increasing amount of interoperability between the video game space and the military over the years. Last year, there was a lot of controversy around various branches of the military advertising on Twitch by way of having their own Twitch channels and also by way of sponsoring Twitch events. Like Twitch does a regular esports event called Twitch Rivals. And there's a big old banner ad for it. Or for the U.S. Army present in a lot of their broadcasts for a while. And then even beyond that, you have companies like Activision working on Call of Duty directly with the military, like directly in terms of, various weapons companies and stuff like that also being involved in the development of these games. Like, I think that not incorrectly, a lot of the entities involved in these things look at video games and say, well, they already have this component of like raw war jingoism and like weaponry usage. How can we get in on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. Call of Duty, like the military would use Call of Duty to recruit new recruits just to find out like who is interested in guns and war. We can sign up right here. So that's like been happening for decades as well. And yeah, last year I think when the military went on Twitch, it was like after paying like $1 million to a marketing agency to like be able to get on to like figure out what's the best way to market to gamers and then get on Twitch that way. And it was like all this bad press, but you paid $1 million for that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was very funny that it became this thing of bad press, right? It's super funny because I did a lot of reporting on it. And as a result, there's actually I got to see this. I can't show it to the world because it was passed to me in confidence. But there was an internal memo published by the military, or like published to, I think it was like the PR agency they were working with, but nonetheless, that was like for military purposes, that specifically cited an article of mine. And they were like, this is an example of anti-military bias in the media.
Oh, no. Well, I read your
And I was like,
stories
well,
and I
right.
didn't see that.
Yeah, it was very amusing to me. But no, I mean, it's just the sort of thing, right, where like you have all of these things happening where if you have the military getting involved in things like video games, especially Twitch, which has like a fairly young audience overall, it's kind of hard to mistake what they're trying to do, which is advertise to young people, to kids in a lot of cases, to get them in that pipeline very early so that you can make them into soldiers later. And like that is just not ethical. But also the military has a long history of doing that. That's why there's recruiting at high schools. That's why there's like ROTC. That's why there's all these other things. That's why you can pay off your, college by joining the Army or the Navy. Like it's all an extension of the same basic idea. It's just that, now they've become more tech savvy and more game literate about it.
Yeah.
So that's super fun. Also, as another fun thing I have to point out, this picture of John Rositiello, the current CEO of Unity, is just, it's a great picture. Phenomenal fucking photo of a person. Um,
Okay, yeah, I wasn't gonna say it, but now that you have,
yeah.
yeah.
Let's see. Somebody in chat said, "Ooh, fun talk," and I don't know if you're being sarcastic or if like you mean it.
Yeah,
I
I'm
thought it
gonna
was a fun
take
talk. I had
it.
a great time.
Yeah, I'm gonna take it in good faith and say that they weren't being sarcastic there. So hopefully.
Yeah, here's hoping. But right, so that was one of the bigger, I think, more impactful stories that happened recently that I think like generated some discussion, but got eclipsed by a lot of other stuff. Let's see. Another kind of, what are some of the more serious things that I pulled up? I feel like we should do serious first, funny second, right? Because life is a tragedy before it's a comedy.
Oh God. Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, let's see. Do I have anything? Well, yeah, there's a thing that happened this week that I just found pretty interesting, which is that there's a website that popped up that was selling a bunch of like actual streamers' Twitch clips as NFTs without their permission. Which is something that is not uncommon in the NFT sector. There's been a lot of like, scams and theft and
Wait.
people being like, well, I didn't make this art, but I'm selling it as an NFT. So it's my NFT and I can make money off of that, which is, again, not great. People shouldn't do that. That's pretty bad. But yeah, so this person ended up, or this website got called out by like big name streamers. I think Mizkiv was the biggest one. He's a big Twitch streamer. And so as a result, after a couple days of kind of a sustained barrage surrounding this, they shut down. The statement is like, it's such like I don't know, it's a very blah statement, but it's kind of funny to me. They're like, thanks to the community for voicing their concerns. In light of this, we're closing the site. We wanted to experiment with a new way to donate to streamers, because they claimed, by the way, that the money they made off of the NFTs was going to go to streamers somehow, but they also didn't talk to streamers about it or set up like any way for that to happen.
It
So
just, yeah,
seems questionable.
it sounds like piracy, but they just got caught. I mean, I can't
Right.
tell if this is the tragedy or this is the comedy, because it seems like a little bit of both.
There we go. See, and what you'll find out is that was my plan all along, definitely. And that I didn't just happen upon this because I was feeling indecisive and I decided to click on something.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, yeah. So like, they apologized. Like, for that, we are truly sorry and we apologize for all the frustration this has caused. But yeah, it's just like, I mean, I'm not surprised that people are trying to sell Twitch clips as NFTs. I think I did a story earlier this year when NFTs were like a big new buzz phrase. Oh, wait, let's see. In chat, James Jackson just said, NFT equals take something with absolutely no commercial value whatsoever, add crypto, tell everyone it is unique and valuable, sell, profit. I mean, like, yeah. Where's the lie? But yeah, like I did a story earlier this year when NFTs were first blowing up. And I was just like trying to see how much people were leaning into like video game and Twitch stuff. And you could already find like even back in, gosh, what was this? April, May, somewhere thereabouts. Tons of people using like not really authorized streamer merch and other like references to streamers to sell NFTs. Not many people actually bought them, which seems to be a broader trend with NFTs. Everyone's like, it's a gold rush. You can make so much money. And then just nobody actually buys the NFTs that a lot of people make. So it's a non-factor.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, Twitch
I put
clips seem like the kind. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I put NFTs in the same category as like cryptocurrency and esports, and it's like we are so hyped about this. When will it pan out? Many people will fail at it, and it will never pan out for those people. So it's just like a couple of bright spots in this like massive industry. But anyway, sorry, I
Yeah.
cut you off. What were you
Well,
saying?
no, I mean the upside of it is that a select few people who are probably already rich will get richer, and isn't that great? I mean, that's all any of us can really ask for.
Oh man.
Good for them, right? I'm glad
Sure.
that rich people are going to make even more money. I was worried they wouldn't.
Sure. That's why you see Elon Musk is so big on all of these things that I just mentioned.
Yeah, because he knows where to get in on the ground floor to make more money, and you can afford to do that when you already have all the money.
Yeah.
It makes it kind of easy. It gives you a little bit of an upper hand there.
Yeah, it's kind of how stocks work.
Yeah, weird. It's wild. There's like this whole system engineered for this one thing. Seems like maybe somebody should have done something else, but oh well, too late to change it.
Yeah, like if you pay $1, you would get maybe like $10 back if something doubles by 10 times. But if you put in $1 million, you get $10 million back. What, I don't know what's up with that.
Weird. And it's all driven by speculation by a bunch of rich people. Like none of it's real. They just think, oh, this seems like it's going to be good, so now it's worth more. Anyway, that's stocks. Great times. In other, I guess, like semi-serious news, sort of, there was the debut this week of the new Marvel game, Marvel's Midnight Suns, which is like a sort of, I mean, it's really interesting to me. I was fascinated by this game when I first heard about it because people described it as like Marvel XCOM, and the XCOM games are some of my favorites. They're tactical strategy games where the idea is that you fight aliens using a squad of characters that you can customize, and like it spans, you know, a ton of different like tactical engagements over time. Characters grow and change. They can die permanently. When that happens, it's very tragic for you, the player. And so they're sort of like putting Marvel into that kind of formula, but they're also like shaving off a lot of like the sharper edges, right? So you end up in this place where, for one, characters can't die permanently, and there's like a lot of pre-made characters and stuff like that. And so it looks neat. Like the battle system seems like it's a mixture of like XCOM and Slay the Spire, meaning that it like uses cards, but you don't have to like buy cards. There's not microtransactions. They're just part of the game. But it also feels like the cool like narrative elements of XCOM, like that you can have this great squad of characters and then one suddenly dies forever and you've got to move on without them and like figure out both tactically and like in terms of the little story you're telling yourself in your head what all of that means. It doesn't really seem to be like present in this game. So I mean, it's kind of like, actually, this is a comparison that I hadn't thought of until just now. It's kind of like what Marvel does to genre pastiches when they make movies, where they're like, we're going to take this beloved movie and add superheroes to it and make it much simpler and kind of like make it resolve nicely and sort of take away the things that made this genre of film or this movie that we're definitely imitating special. And like, who knows, maybe this game will turn out great. It certainly looks like it's got production values. The developer for Axis is like a very proven developer. They do XCOM and they do Civilization, and they basically never miss. I mean, you could argue like the most recent Civ isn't that good, but otherwise, they know their stuff. So I mean, you know, might be good, but anyway, it exists.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, sounds like you should check it out.
Yeah, I plan to. We'll see. I don't know. It also strikes me that so far there's not really been a good Marvel game yet. Like the Marvel Avengers game is kind of a mess, and like the Guardians of the Galaxy game looks like it seems like maybe it'll be fine.
Yeah, we don't know yet. Yeah. I mean, the story behind Marvel's Avengers is very like touching, but yeah, the graphics are another story.
Yeah, no. Elise in chat just asked if you can play as Gator Loki. God, I hope so. Loki was a show that like I watched, and as I watched it, I was like, I don't think this is good, but I am kind of enjoying watching it, so I will watch all of it.
You don't think it's good? Okay, well, I'll stop you right there. Like, what?
Loki was ranged between fine and just like not incoherent, but just like it could never figure out what it actually wanted to do or be. It was like, we're going to be a character study of Loki. Never mind, we're going to be like a study more of like this other character too. Never mind, we're going to be like in the final episode just a bridge between like Marvel movies. We're going to introduce the new big bad, and the two main characters we've spent this entire thing establishing are going to completely like fade into the background and not matter anymore. And like it's such a weird mishmash of like attempted things. It suffers from the same issue that every Marvel thing does, which is it's so beholden to this larger universe of films that have been planned out years in advance to make tons of money that it can't actually be its own thing. It just like it doesn't get to be. And then it also suffers from like a form factor of just a few episodes, meaning that it's basically just a long movie, except for it's a long movie that doesn't really, each episode feels like it's part of a different movie. Wow. In terms of just like where they go and what characters are doing and like character motivations. And they don't even use Loki well. Yeah, I'm just going to keep doing this rant because like they go from Loki. The main thing that's interesting about Loki is that he's a weird anti-hero. You never know quite what side he's on. His motivations are always like a little bit unclear. You know he has a good heart, but you also know you also don't really know like what he's going to do with that. And then in this, he went from like being maybe the most evil version of Loki, at least in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to being a generic good guy in the span of one episode after watching a clip compilation of himself on YouTube.
Hey,
He was
that
like,
caught
yeah,
up.
you know what? I'm good now.
That
Like,
caught him up on like all the years of characterization character development that he went through in the MCU.
yeah, that's definitely how that works. I love to watch clips of things and be like, I'm a changed man now. Like going through all of these crazy, traumatic, and wild experiences with my like brother who I love and hate, Thor, didn't change me. But watching some clips, we're set. We're good. Whatever.
Yeah, watching himself die, I mean that's everything. But okay, I would put Loki like below WandaVision. WandaVision's better, but I would say Loki had the ambiance that I was looking for, and it was just really mysterious. You don't know where it's going, which is what kept me hooked.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely had some fun like design and like an interesting vibe, and yeah, it had that like what's gonna happen next factor. So I mean, I enjoyed that part. But yeah, I watched it and was like, it wasn't good, but I did enjoy watching it, and I will watch the second season whenever that happens.
Can we agree the Winter Soldier, Falcon, whatever that movie, that really long one is called, is the worst one out of all?
Oh yeah, no, that one wasn't very good at all.
Great.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I don't know. I think that What If is giving it a run for its money in terms of just not being very good. But yeah, anyway, that's enough Marvel talk. Okay, now time to rapid fire a bunch of dumb stuff. So this story I picked entirely because of the headline. I have not even read it. I just love this headline. Apparently, Hideo Kojima wanted to make a game with, you actually pronounce like Moss Mickelson or something like that.
Oh,
But
I just
obviously
say
it's spelled
Mads.
Mads, and so he wanted to make a game called Mads Max.
No.
I guess this is a real thing that happened, and like is very Kojima. Yeah, he tweeted about it. I have a number of ideas that I want to create with Mads as the main character. I once explained one of them to him. He listened intently, but then I told him the title. He broke his face. I think he meant anyway. He seemed to think I was joking. I was serious though. The tentative title was Mads Max.
What?
Like, cool story, Kojima.
I mean, knowing him, he could probably pull this off, and then everybody would still buy it, and it would still work. But like, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's very like Kojima is constantly teetering on that brink between like genius and madness, which I think is the entire reason people like what he creates.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is just like peak Kojima. And anytime that there's a peak, you can guarantee anytime there's peak Kojima, it will be on this show the week of. I will be like, all right, here's his latest thing he said that is like, you know what? You do you. You've earned it. You're somebody that everybody knows of in the games industry. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, next time you do this, definitely bring Gene on. I'm sure he has many, many thoughts about Kojima.
Oh yeah, we can do the metaverse special next week, and then just digress into talking about Kojima the whole time.
Yeah, sounds
That'll be
good.
the
I
whole
would watch
episode.
that.
Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind. But yeah, okay. So, oh, that's right. Sorry, I do have to go back to Marvel for a second because this story is way too important. Which
Gotta
is
speak
that
Marvel ever.
so the game's gonna have like a relationship system where you can like get to know heroes better. But unlike in BioWare games, that does not lead to sex. You can't. Yeah. So sorry, folks. But I say that knowing full well that because this game is going to be on PC, it will be fixed by modders who will probably just put all that in to the extent that they can. Speaking of modders, the team behind Cyberpunk ended up hiring a few of them this week to work on the modding tools for Cyberpunk 2077, a notoriously broken game, one that doesn't really show any signs of necessarily ever becoming great. At best, it seems like it's going to be, when it's all said and done, decent, but not in any way, phenomenal or outstanding. It'll be a serviceable game, right? But nonetheless, this is a cool thing, I think. I mean, there's a fairly long history of companies hiring exemplary modders to work with them. But I think it's become less of a thing in recent years as kind of the pipeline into creating video games has become more streamlined. And it's less like you pluck somebody out of the ether and more like you get an education and you work in like QA or like some sort of associate entry level position. And then you work your way up and all that stuff. So a little bit of a throwbacky thing here. And then also like this will pave the way for better tools for more people to make additional content for Cyberpunk of their own, and to maybe over time for users to expand it into the game that CD Projekt promised, which isn't ideal. They shouldn't necessarily have to do that work, but you know, there's an outcome here that would be Cyberpunk eventually being this really amazing game because people turned it into one using tools that were made by other modders.
Yeah, I mean, they also say they are going to be bug squashing, so that can only be good things for the game.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, I don't know. They've been bug squashing for a while, and it doesn't seem to have changed that substantially. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
The final mod related story that I have is the most important one, and is I think the one that we're going to end the show on because it's just bizarre enough for my tastes, which is that a modder decided to start adding the head of game developer Sean Murray to every element of No Man's Sky that he could until a new update came out. Now, granted, I think that update did come out this week, so you know the heading has already probably ended. But man, this guy got real creative. So already we see like obviously Sean Murray's face on the main character model, but also being followed by a little drone or a big drone that is Sean Murray. It gets better though. So here's the Sean Murray car. Have fun.
No Man's Cars. God.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it continues. Let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, here's his face as a portal. This one is like,
Oh,
you know, you got to look a little close.
Wow.
Then you can see kind of his teeth and face swirling around in there like it's a washing machine or something.
That's disturbing to look at.
Yeah, it's pretty upsetting. Let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, then we just have creatures that are his head, and they're kind of stuck in the ground, probably begging for death.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Live forever. Wow.
And then let's see. Yeah, so this one is difficult to parse where his face is, right? You got to look really closely and see kind of like the skin toned little bits of these pillars. And then it's like, oh yeah, I think that's Sean Murray broken apart into a million little pieces.
Somebody should check with the devs on their reaction to this. I'm like pretty sure they'll be like, oh, there's so much pressure to update the game, but also love this or are disturbed by this.
Yeah, probably both. I would say love and disturbed by is the correct middle ground to walk here. And then you have him like riding his own head. Yeah.
To be honest, there was a lot of this like in the Ariana Grande Fortnite concert too, where you can like dance as Ariana next to Ariana, but never like riding Ariana's head on Ariana. That would be another level of.
Yeah. Oh wait, you were asking what the developers thought. So Sean Murray did reply, "No surrender." Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's real good. I'm glad that this happened. I wish more people would just, you know, instead of like, because we have this whole dynamic now, right? Where when a game isn't getting updated soon enough, people like decide to harass developers and post all these awful messages and be like, it's a dead game. It's so bad. I can't believe that they gave me this amazing experience and then didn't like tend to my every beck and call for 14 consecutive years. And that's just exhausting and depressing and sad. This is what people should be doing. This is what you do. You just add people's faces to things. It's a good creative outlet. Doesn't hurt anyone. Gets your point across.
Yeah, if you
What
want
more
a
do
game
you need?
update, yeah, if you want a game update, like the bar is set this high now. You have to. This is what you have to do.
Yeah, actually, here we go. That's it. All developers should say no more updates until people find a way to add all of our faces to the things that we've created in a series of increasingly disturbing ways. Until then, stop asking. We're on break.
Yeah. I don't know about their faces because what if, like that could lead to problems in the future, but maybe like the main character or like maybe like a bunch of trees or. Yeah,
here's the way to get around all of this. So there are those websites that like procedurally generate human faces, like humans that have never existed, but it looks like they're real people. Just do that. Just get a random face generator. Probably it won't create someone who's real, It might. You never know. There are only so many combinations of facial structures you can do. But yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like it. We've just landed on the perfect solution.
Yeah. Once again, I have solved the problem of online harassment. And it was that easy. I
Wow.
can't believe that no one thought of this before. But here I am having to clean up everyone's messes. Oh well. All right. Well, I think on that note, we are going to end the show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the marathon first episode, which in streaming terms is not a marathon at all. We only went for like 2 hours. This is baby stuff. But nonetheless, thank you for everyone who stuck around for the whole thing or even for most of the thing. And we'll be back 4 p.m. next week doing the same stuff, different guests, different news. But, we'll be here.
Quick plug to Mikhail. He's going to be streaming tomorrow if you want
Oh,
to
yeah.
catch that on this channel.
Yeah, he's going to be playing the new Valorant map. So that'll be fun to watch for the people at the intersection of interest in video game news and specifically Valorant in like a really diehard way. But yeah, until then, thanks for watching, folks.
Bye.